Alright, y'all. So, I know I told y'all I would do a second video to talk about the second step of my fermentation for vinegar process. My mama looking at me like I'm crazy because every time I make a video, she be like, why are you talking to yourself? And I'm not. Not really. Why tell you? It's real life. Why make announcements? Y'all don't be quiet no way. Anyway, she throwing shit at me, y'all. I don't know why she tripping. She not even on camera. I should put her on camera. Anyway, she don't even want me to reference her being in the room. She cutting her eyeballs at me. Anyway, so because that photo now is making the rounds, and I made a video a couple, what was that, last month sometime? Because the first picture, I'm not saying video, yeah, whatever. The picture is making another round. The concept of whoever bought brags or whatever. Who cares if it's true or not? These are these opportunities to say, yo, how easy is this to make myself? Like, some of this we shouldn't have to wait to get to somebody doing something fucked up to the things that we buy, when some of this we should have been doing ourselves and doing it well enough and in abundance enough that we've had stuff. Like, how long does the brag sit on your shelf? Unpasteurized, unfiltered vinegar sit in your cabinet for a long time. So that means you could have made a big batch last year. But we're here. Doesn't matter, I guess. So anyway, so we're going to check on a few jars. I have bottled 2 already. So they are the vinegar that I like, the taste. Alright, so this is all the way, and I know it's not as dark as y'all be thinking, but can't even remember what apples I used for this. One of these might be a pear. I used pears. But it had the mother in it, the SCOBY, which is the symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. That's that ooey gooey alien shit that you want on top of your vinegar. If you've ever made a kombucha, you already know what I'm talking about. The same culture will form on your vinegars, because kombucha has a vinegary taste. It is nearly the same process. You're just trying to get a fizz on it, so you're doing a second fermentation in a closed environment, and you're fermenting black tea or green tea. So you're using the SCOBY to ferment a tea instead of ferment some apples, right? But kombucha has an alcohol content because not all the sugars get eaten up, and it's the same kind of steps with vinegar, except you're converting all of the alcohol into acetic acid, which is what gets the vinegar. So the first video talked about the first steps of this is converting the sugar to alcohol. So that's why we add sugar to the jars that we put our apples in. So right now I don't have any jars that have apples. I have a nice tub of apples, scraps. So I got about 25, 30, probably more than that, pounds of apples that I've been going through, making different things. And when I peel them, scraps go in the bucket, cores go in the bucket, and I'll cover it with sugar, put some filtered water in, filtered non-chlorinated water, so distilled water, spring water. If you have nothing other than your tap water, you're going to let that air out over 24 hours. That's why your bleach bottles, they put in that clear bottle to disinfect your house, and you keep it in that bottle. That's why it's ineffective after 24 hours, because the way chlorine works, it's light sensitive. Once the light hits it, those chlorine molecules break apart. So if you leave the water sitting out for a long enough time, the chlorine that's in the water will break apart. And you won't have the chlorinated aspects. And you don't want that, because those things will be counterproductive for growing microorganisms such as the yeast and bacteria that you need for vinegar making, right? So this is the first ferment. To ensure that I get it to the alcohol content that I want, I keep it closed. Making alcohol is an anaerobic process. It does not, you don't want oxygen. Now, I know that there's some people out there that are like, let me just throw this on the shelf, and they put the splash of mother in it with some of the, like, so they got a jar of vinegar that they already know is good, and they'll add that to it, add some SCOBY to that, a starter to it, and then let it go, sit it out in the air. That's fine if that's your process, right? Because I'm trying to learn how to make vinegar that is efficient enough for canning, which means you have to have a 5% acidity on it, so you want to make sure that you have a good start to it. And then, of course, if you're using it for taste, for cooking, mostly for things, you want it to taste good. Like, anything can turn into vinegar. Is it going to be a good tasting vinegar is the question. And then good tasting vinegar, that could all be relative to your flavor palette, your taste, whatever you like. So I've got a couple that are in the vinegar converting stages. I have another apple cider vinegar. This actually is not the apple cider vinegar. This is actually a beer vinegar. So I'm turning beer into vinegar. So literally, check this. So I know we're talking about even apple cider vinegar and how do we get to the vinegar part of it. You can convert any alcohol into a vinegar, right? You can turn beers and wines into vinegar. You could turn higher proof distilled into vinegars. You have to dilute it, right? So there's some caveats, there's some other things. Again, if you watch my other video, I think I put the percentage wrong in my further research. I think it might be, you could go as high as like 10% alcohol by volume, but you don't want to go higher than that. So most of your wines, you're going to have to dilute a little bit to get the concentration down. And the reason why that is too much alcohol is going to kill the bacteria that you want, that is going to be necessary to convert alcohol into acetic acid, right? So if it's too high, the bacteria is not going to be able to convert it no matter how much air you expose it to, right? So after you got your alcohol, so the alcohol, you know that you got alcohol because you see it buzzing and building up that the bubbles and all of that. You'll see people who burp their jars. Like I even saw somebody say, like, put a cloth on it and then burp it. If you got a cloth on it, you don't need to burp it because it already has oxygen exchange. It has air. It has the ability to breathe already. You want to burp it if you're doing like me and you have a closed container system, right? You don't want that carbon dioxide to build up to the point where it's going to crack or break a jar, right, and stuff like that. Again, you can always start it with the cloth, all right? I like it this way. It's what I like to do, right? Especially since I'm starting it in this big old bucket. I don't want this to accidentally have something spill in it right at this moment, whatever. So I'm going to let this ferment, and I can tell it's fermenting. I've weighted down my apples, so you could either get in there every once in a while at the beginning stages, because that helps the fermentation. You cannot get to the vinegar stage without the alcohol stage, so whether you're doing it all at once or not. So submerging the apples and then mixing the shit up, getting the fermentation going is a good idea, right? Measurements, I don't measure. I should. So if you're looking to me for an exact recipe, like how much sugar versus how much water to add, some people out there, I've seen a teaspoon of sugar per cup of water. Like, I know how to do it when I'm lacto fermenting. Lacto fermentation is 2%, 3% salt content. Sugar's a little different, but again, enough sugar. If you don't have enough sugar, it's not going to get to the alcohol content that you want. But again, that really, really matters for like wine making. Like, depending how alcoholic you want your wine, like if you're really making wine, right? So, like I said, this is a beer. This is one of the apple ciders. So if you can see, like I made this video already, but I think I didn't like what I was saying, so I didn't post it. You can see the SCOBY floating in there, right? So that's about 2. And then this has 1, 2. So and you want to, like, I'm taking them out the cabinet so y'all can see them. But you kind of want them to sit still. You want them to chill out. Because not disturbing it allows that SCOBY to form. So, like, after you ferment it, after it becomes alcohol, after the fermentation has slowed down, like it's not as many bubbles, then you want to strain out your fruit and let it sit in there with the aerobic process. Now you want the air really to get in. So after you filtered it out or strained out the fruit scraps, right, then you let it sit with a breathable top, cheesecloth, a towel that you don't want. Some people use coffee filters, whatever your heart's desire. I use paper towels in the rings when I'm doing them in mason jars. What else? Yeah, and you're going to let it sit, and you're going to let it sit, and you're going to let it sit, and you let it sit. And then you can taste it every once in a while. You can smell it. It'll be vinegary. If it's a failed vinegar attempt, it's going to smell more like acetone. It's going to smell more like nail polish remover and not vinegar. My friend she tested it with baking soda to see if it did the volcano reaction. There are testing strips that you can get to test the acidity, and then, there's I forgot, I think it's a titration meter or something like that. It'll tell you how acidic it is. So, again, if you've ever looked on the bottle of vinegar, if you've ever done any canning, and stuff like that, it'll say 4%, it'll say 5% on some of the bottles, and people who can enough or pickle enough know that they need 5%. It's the recommended acidity level. So if you want to use this for other processes, like some people are just using it to clean or using it to make some fire ciders and stuff like that. But if you really want to get into all the ways that we use vinegar and starting to replace your need to buy vinegars from the store, or you want to make artisanal vinegar because you got some, want to make your own red wine vinegar because you got some good red wine that's left over, or you want to make something out of a beer and then you want to use it to can or pickle something, you're going to have the knowledge of how acidic is it really, right? Is it really the vinegar you want? And you're going to taste it, because if you're going to use it for cooking, it better taste good, right? And stuff like that. So, some of these vinegars have been sitting for weeks before I took the mother out and used it for another one. So, you're looking for that scum, that gooey stuff to form. There is another thing that could also form, and usually this happens when you've got the fruit still in, and it's a cam yeast. So I have a picture or something. I'll figure out how to post it. So the cam yeast, or look it up yourself, because some of this stuff you gotta know what it looks like for yourself, beyond my pictures. But it is a film that'll form over it, and it'll look like spider webby, right? It's not mold. It's a different concept than mold is. Mold will be more fuzzy, but cam yeast happens when fruit that you're using to ferment isn't submerged enough, or you haven't stirred it enough. So in that beginning fermentation process, if you're not shaking it up, stirring it up, or if you have not weighted it down with fermentation weights, glass bowls, plastic bags filled with water, maybe even a plastic bag filled with beans, you want to keep it with non-reactive material, so you don't want to put any metal in there. So I got these joints off Amazon, probably like for $9. Glass fermentation weights, right? And so I just use them to weigh down stuff that I'm fermenting, so that I can stop. I was using plastic bags filled with water, and sometimes that was bad because the water would leak out. But that was because of my lacto fermentation. So because that's by weight, and water weight is included, you don't want to change the salinity of your lacto fermentations too, because it throws it off, right? Because then you're introducing bacteria into the fermentation process. But yeah, so you want to get that first fermentation done. You want the bubbles to slow down, filter out your fruit, and then let it breathe. Put a cloth on it and let it sit, right? So the first process you're going to be moving, but once you take that fruit out, you're going to let it sit. Oh yeah, by the way, cam yeast is not poisonous. It's not harmful to you. So if it's on there, you can still salvage whatever it is that you're fermenting. However, it might change the taste of your ferment, right? It's not dangerous, but it might change the taste of it, and it's hard to get rid of and keep it away. Like I was doing some peppers, fermenting peppers, and the yeast formed, and I scraped it off. But I was taking pictures of it because it was so cool, because it was like, okay, I want to take pictures of it to get a real good idea of what it looks like to show other people. And then, of course, from a scientific observer point of view, it looks really dope. But then I would scrape it, and then it would come back. But I was letting it come back, but that was because the peppers were sitting above the brine that I made, and they weren't weighted down. So the more that they are exposed to the air, the more that it doesn't move around in that stage when the fruit is still in there, fruit, vegetable, whatever, it's still there, then yeah, you're going to get this chance for cam to form. But yeah, vinegar making is not that hard. I've seen some posts where people were like, leave it for 10 days. I mean, maybe if you use the starter to help, then it gets kombucha-y, but I say let it go. And you're not harming it by letting it sit longer. You're not harming it by letting that SCOBY form. And then if you let it sit long enough, you should get another form, right? So you'll have one that's in there already, and then another layer that is formed at the top, just like you would if you make kombucha. You know this already. And then you can take both of those, add a little vinegar to it, add a little, maybe even sugar water to it, because you want to, they're microorganisms, they're living things, you got to feed it. And you can just keep it in another jar, and every once in a while feed it, keep them covered with liquid and a little sugar, and let them just go. I've got a bunch of SCOBYs somewhere. So these are my vinegar making ones. And then in the other refrigerator, I have my kombucha SCOBYs. And if you're going to be making them with drastically different measures, like I don't want to ruin my kombucha SCOBY for vinegar making. I even use 2 different SCOBYs when I'm using a different kind of tea. Like I make a hibiscus kombucha, and the hibiscus will change the consistency of the SCOBY than I would for the ones that I use with my black tea. But yeah, as long as you feed it, it should still be good. A little alien slime. Like, it's crazy. I just saw a video. Like, you type in vinegar, DIY vinegar, apple cider vinegar, DIY, whatever. It'll pop up whatever post, right? So, of course, a post popped up from one of these canning groups. And the girl was like making my first vinegar, and this thing was floating at the top. She took it out. She's like, so do I just throw this out in there? And I could only imagine what the comments were saying. Like, no. That's what you want. You want that slime. You want this congealed mass of goodness, which is what gives the vinegar its flavor, its properties, its, all of the things that make the vinegar and the kombucha what it is that slime. And if you start to get enough of them, you can share those with other people, because every time you make one, if you're doing it right, you should get another. It's like the gift that keeps on giving, right? It just keeps exponentially growing, and give it away. For real, start a kombucha or a SCOBY circle where everybody's just like making their own versions and sharing the SCOBYs within the circle. Alright, but we're gonna let this vinegar in the bucket go, ferment for a little bit, check back in next week, and then we'll switch it over. Hopefully we'll be switching it over to the actual vinegar making process. Alright, 20 minutes later. I hope this helps. Peace.